meal, and so we need to have some protein.
You have to carb count, you have to weigh food, check sugar, all of that. People don't understand that type 1 is an autoimmune disease. Her pancreas does not produce the insulin needed to live. The Omnipod is the pump she uses, it's tubeless. We have to change that every 3 days.
Well done. He's worried about you.
What are we waiting for? Cried the lion.
Nighttime is the worst. I live in fear every time I lay my head down, wondering if Layla will wake to see another day.
If I should die before I wake.
It's really, really hard. I don't wish this on anyone. Your life revolves around keeping your child alive. She went through scent impression training, and so each glucose number has a different smell. Jubilee is trained on Layla's scent.
She alerts Mama so she can tell Mama if I am high or low.
She's also gone and fetched the meter.
Thank you. Good girl. Good meter.
Seeing Layla go through what she does on a daily basis has made me want to be a stronger person for her and for myself. My goal is to not only be the best mom that I can be, but to educate and advocate in her honor.
They stole our hearts and inspired us to do more for diabetes.
We were able to raise funds for JDRF and also raise funds to give to Diabetes Camp as well.
Having Amy and Layla come to our district meetings to speak, it made a positive impact on a lot of clubs.
As Lions, we're happy to help spread the word with Amy and Layla about diabetes.
I don't want diabetes to ever stop her. We want her to look at the world and know that she can take it on.
More than 30 million people have diabetes, and 1 in 3 of them don't know they have it. People with diabetes are twice as likely to have a stroke or a heart attack as people without diabetes, and at an earlier age. In the last 20 years, the number of adults diagnosed with diabetes has more than tripled. Diabetes is the 7th leading cause of death in the U.S. and causes more deaths each year than breast cancer and AIDS combined. Know your numbers, call your doctor, and get tested. Stop diabetes before it stops you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you. And we have Lion Anu, who would like to say a few words to welcome everyone and talk about today a little bit.
Great. Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the very first Lions Virtual Diabetes Symposium. My name is Lion Anju Puri, and I want to kick off today's program with all the wonderful speakers that we have. So welcome everyone, and we will get started. But before we hand over to the speakers of the day, I wanted to just give a brief introduction of what we are going to be talking about. Diabetes is a chronic and an ongoing condition. This means that there is no cure, and we live with it probably for the rest of our lives. Serving in diverse communities all over the world, Lions see and feel the effects of diabetes and are doing something about it together. As we observe American Diabetes Day, few of our Lions clubs and their affiliated Leo clubs have taken an initiative to create this awareness. And through this diabetes symposium, we are going to be raising that awareness. It is supported by Lions MD16, District 16N, Diabetes Chairs, and Rutgers State University of New Jersey. Our primary goal is to raise the awareness, and by providing advocacy and education on what diabetes is and how we can manage this chronic disease. Whether you yourself have diabetes or you are a caretaker of a loved one with diabetes, the struggles are endless. But the good news is that there is always ways to manage diabetes and to prevent or delay the serious complications. So with that, I'm going to introduce Donna Friedel and Barbara Corsaro, who are from JDRF and are hosting our session 1 on type 2 diabetes. And we hope with the speakers lined up, what we are going to do is make it known to you that you are an equal partner along with your healthcare provider to manage this disease that is chronic. So over to you, Donna.
Thank you, Anju. My name is Donna Friedel, and you'll be seeing Barbara in a little bit. She is the chair for Diabetes Action and Awareness in Lions District 16N. I serve that role in Lions District 16L and also for the multi-district. I'm going to talk to you a bit about where we've been, because I think before we talk about where we're going with diabetes, it's important for us all to realize where we were just 100 years ago. And I'm going to ask Mahesh, our techno guy, to pull up my PowerPoint. Okay, the next slide, please. Something that we as Lions are very excited about is we just, as an organization, had our 100th anniversary the other year. Here in New Jersey, we're celebrating 100 years. 100 years ago, diabetes type 1 was a death sentence. They could not really do anything to help you. And for parents, the heartbreaking situation was that many of the children were just put in hospital wards when they reached a coma and waited for them to pass away. It was in 1922, almost 100 years ago, that they first were able to isolate animal insulin. They realized insulin seemed to be the key, and they were able to, in January 11th, the first person got a dose of insulin. He had a reaction. It took several more days to get it purified enough. But the dramatic story is that when they were able to achieve that in 1922, the doctors went through the ward injecting the patients who were close to death with insulin. And by the time they reached the end of the ward in the hospital, the first patients were waking up. So they realized that this was an important advancement, and they were able to save the lives of those children and young adults. One thing I want to just clarify right away is we used to call this, juvenile diabetes, and we still see that word, but you can get type 1 diabetes at any age. The key factor is that your body does not make enough insulin and ultimately doesn't make any insulin for you to use to process. And without insulin, you cannot survive. It took another 40-some years. In 1968, scientists were finally able to synthesize insulin, which they called humulin. And at this point, insulin became a lot more available. It is a lot easier to use. Some people still have to use the other kind if they have an allergic reaction to humulin, unfortunately. But this was a game changer for the treatment of diabetes. And it took the following year, actually, that they had something even more critical, really, for those of us who've lived with a loved one with diabetes, is blood glucose monitors. In 1969, the first monitors became available to hospitals and physicians. Before that, they only could test your urine to see how much sugar is in it. And it was a very rough estimate of how much Humulin they should give you in order to adjust it. But keep in mind, for 40-some years, they were really doing ballpark because they had nothing but urine tests to tell if someone's sugar was too high and there was a lot in their system that they had to adjust. An amazing advancement came in 1981. The first personal use blood glucose monitors hit the market. And we still use blood glucose monitors today in the home. When you have a child diagnosed with diabetes, frequently you're going to start out at the hospital getting treatment, and then they're going to teach you very quickly how to measure blood sugar with a monitor, send you home with that monitor, and with needles in some cases, in order to, other than the pump and the other treatments. But this was only in 1981. My first child who got diabetes was diagnosed in 1988, and I didn't realize that this was a relatively new advancement that made it, as hard as I thought it was, it would have been impossible to take care of a 1-year-old without a blood glucose monitor. 2006 is the next major advancement. We have the Dexcom company introduces the first continuous glucose monitoring system, which is a major game changer, especially in terms of having type 1 diabetics be able to achieve normalcy, be able to do the things that everyone else can do, because the biggest worry we all have are the low sugars. High sugars we have a little more time to deal with, but with low sugars, you have a crisis on your hands within moments sometimes. And the Dexcom has a way of alerting people, and we're going to have some talking about that from a diabetic in a video later, but that is a major advantage in enabling you to have that system that tells you when the blood sugar is going too low or too high so you can address it. Next slide, please. For those of us who are older, when we thought of type 1 diabetes until it was in our own families, it was Mary Tyler Moore who brought this to the public eye. Mary Tyler Moore was already an actress, a dancer, and at 33, when she was on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And with the demanding schedule of being on a weekly TV series, she had to learn to adapt and to change her lifestyle and become very healthy in order to sustain the level of activity that she had been used to having. As she told people many times, and she became a worldwide advocate for type 1 diabetes, is that she had to become vigilant. She had to manage her disease, and she gave voice to the thoughts and experiences of many others living with the disease. As her life went on, she developed more of the long-term complications. And it was her courage in the face of these that gave courage to many other people. She was Mare, who we all knew, being on our TV sets every week. And she was showing that type 1 diabetics are real people who fight real battles. Next slide. We have new faces who are diabetics today. I didn't put the names on here because I wanted to see how many people would start recognizing them before I tell you. But something very inspiring to me is that Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who is a Supreme Court of the United States Justice, is a type 1 diabetic. And when she was first nominated to be a judge, there were questions raised as to whether she could do the job. It's a difficult job. You have to stay vigilant, you're alert, thinking clearly, and people questioned whether she could do it, being a type 1 diabetic who might experience low or high sugars throughout the day. And clearly she showed them she could, and she's now serving on the highest court in the land. Someone who's been very famous in reaching younger people is the man next to her in the picture, Nick Jonas. He's in the Jonas Brothers. He's been a famous singer and actor for years now. And he's been very candid in talking about how diabetes has affected his life and his career, but he's achieved the highest heights in music and acting despite having been a type 1 diabetic. Below that is Vanessa Williams, a famous actress and singer, and along with Halle Berry. They are two women, African-American women, who have made it known that they have type 1 diabetes. Many people keep it quiet who are famous because they don't want it to be something that holds them back. But they've also served as the face of diabetes, and that it cannot stop you from doing the most demanding of careers. Something we often thought, especially when my kids were young, is that professional sports would have been out of reach. And the next person is John Carter, excuse me. And he is with the Ravens. And he tests his blood sugar. He has a continuous monitor. When he's playing, he has to keep testing his sugar throughout the day. He doesn't wear his monitors in the game. But he's able to play football at a really high professional level and be a type 1 diabetic. Bret Michaels is a rock and roll person. And one of the things this brings up, and I put him on here, is because when a type 1 diabetic has a low sugar, it often is mistaken by others as being a drug reaction. Maybe they overdosed. Maybe they're taking something that's an illegal drug. And he has had serious health concerns that it took a while for people to realize that he was just simply having a low sugar. We also have people with high achievements in the arts and writing. And Anne Rice, who is a very famous writer and very successful with best-selling books, has been candid about how her type 1 diabetes has affected her. Next slide, please. Now it's the era of social media, and there are many opportunities. One of our speakers is Tom Deeney, who's active with JDRF, and when our children were young, we participated in a group called POLO, Parents of Little Ones, because something you find is you feel really alone when you are taking care of a type 1 diabetic, especially when they're very young. And now there are many, many online groups and apps and things to help you. And I just grabbed a couple of them for you to check out. You can Google Beyond Type 1 app. There's the Community Table, the DKA campaign, which stands for diabetic ketoacidosis, diabetes scholars. This is something I didn't know about, but there's scholarships available for type 1 diabetics, and recognizing that they face challenges that not everyone faces, and so that they can receive college scholarship money. Shop the Drop, and this is if you want things to wear and promote the battle against diabetes type 1, this is a place where you can find things, hats and t-shirts and things that show that you are in the fight against type 1 and also trying to find a cure. There's the Get Insulin org, Jerry the Bear, Jesse was here, Marathon Team, and that's an interesting one. My husband's a runner, and being a diabetic and running can be really scary because you're using all of your resources when you do a marathon. So this is a place to find support if you want to continue to be a runner or explore running and still be able to find the ways to manage your type 1 diabetes. And Slipstream Events is another resource, but I encourage those of you who have diabetes or who have loved ones with type 1 diabetes to check out what's online. Just Google and for support, for resources, and you'll find things close to you. You'll find chat groups. You'll find all sorts of things. There's other ones that actually is a pen pal for old-fashioned writing letters, and it's a pen pal organization. So those are great things for you to look at. Next slide, please. Lions have identified diabetes as one of our core areas of service. And as you'll know from the numbers, it'll be talked about this morning, type 1 diabetes affects a tremendous number of people. Lions Strides events raise funds for JDRF, and you can find more information on lionsclubs.org, where as Lions, they'll give you a whole packet of information on how you can do a Strides event. And we have someone from LCIF later who'll be giving you more specific information. But they're great fun. The picture shown is from our last walk on the boardwalk for JDRF Lions in New Jersey. All 3 districts have participated in raising funds and doing a walk down the Atlantic City boardwalk, so that we are both raising funds but also raising awareness and getting out in the sunshine too. Next slide, please. as I mentioned, Lions International, they'll provide not only resource information, but they will provide grant money for action and awareness projects. Lions districts are eligible for grants up to $150,000. Multiple districts can get grants up to $250,000. And you can find ways to support youth camps. Amy and Layla are going to talk about that and the importance of camps to a diabetic. You can have diabetes screening activities, especially for type 2 diabetes, and comprehensive follow-up plans, equipment acquisition. One of the things available today are glucose monitors for those who are in need. That today's event will be supplying monitors for those, and Mahesh will speak about that later. But I highly encourage all of the Lions who are watching to check out what's available on lionsclub.org and just put in the search screen diabetes, and it will give you a wealth of information on what you can do. The next screen, please. T1 Detect is JDRF screening, education, and awareness program. And this is something that's new and exciting. I did not put it on my timeline because I wasn't sure exactly how far back. But what's important about this is that you can find out if you're likely to get diabetes. There was a little bit in the advanced videos before we started today's program talking about this. And I give you the website there on jdrf.org, T1D resources, T1 Detect, because a key point of this is to delay the onset of type 1 diabetes for as long as possible. We know that the longer you have it, even with the best of control, you can have complications. But when you have this knowledge is power, and the families can use this testing to detect early when there's someone like in the family likely to get it. They can plan, they can prepare, and start taking the steps that will delay the onset of the type 1 diabetes. And it's very easy tests, and it can help save a life. Next slide, please. And I'm done. I'm very excited now to introduce the next speaker, Barbara Corsera, and I have worked together for several years with juvenile diabetes, and Barbara has done some amazing things. She's been a lioness and a lion for 22 years. She has served as the president of Lioness and Lions clubs, and she has been a district zone chair. But she's also, for several years now, served as her district juvenile diabetes chairperson. She has served as a family coach for JDRF, and she has spearheaded the massive involvement of her Lions District 16N in New Jersey to raise funds for JDRF at a walk at Liberty State Park, and I'm hoping she'll tell you more about that. We've worked together for a number of years now. She's my friend and a fantastic lion, and I'm turning the program over to her right now. Thank you, Lion Barbara.
Hello, everyone. I would like you to watch the video that's coming up, which shows my grandson Matthew, who was diagnosed at 15 months old. He's 11 now. Started out with getting daily multiple injections each day for getting his insulin, and then from there progressed to wearing an insulin pump, wearing a sensor, and then wearing the latest insulin pump, which communicates with the sensor. And the advances in technology have been fabulous, and I look forward to continuing my work to raise funds for Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, to show Lions and to show people how our money donated goes towards research, goes towards technology to make the lives of these children and adults and their families much easier on a day-to-day basis. I know personally, watching him babysitting overnight and waking up every hour to 2 hours to make sure he was okay. And now with the new technology, it's even easier. And at this point, I would like to turn over the program to this video.
Hey everybody, I'm David Corsaro, and I'm here with...
Hi.
Matthew Corsaro, and we're actually doing a quick JDRF diabetes update. So we want to thank everybody for always contributing to the JDRF for us and helping us spread awareness of type 1 diabetes. And we wanted to just update you about some pretty exciting stuff that's been going on. A couple months ago, Matthew started wearing a new Dexcom sensor. Can you show it to everybody, please? The sensor.
Oh.
Right there. See that? And what that does is that measures his blood sugar once every 5 minutes and sends the signal to my phone. And so that we can keep track of what his blood sugar is. So rather than Matthew getting 10, 12, 14 different finger sticks every single day, now he gets that inserted into him once every 10 days, and then it sends a signal every 5 minutes. It allows us to keep track of his blood sugar. So that's been huge. But about 2 weeks ago, we got even more good news because Matthew got a brand new tandem insulin pump. And what's really interesting about this particular insulin pump is this pump talks to the sensor. So essentially what
It's a robot. I don't know how it talks.
It's a robot. It's a robot. So essentially what happens is whenever he eats food or consumes some sugar, we obviously have to go into that pump and administer insulin for him. But throughout the rest of the day, when his blood sugar would normally just go through some minor fluctuations, the pump will sort of communicate with the sensor and either turn on or turn off little tiny bits of insulin that he gets all day long, which is called the basal rate. And it really helps to keep his blood sugar flat all day long. So whereas a year and a half ago, when he didn't have the sensor and he had the old insulin pump, we had to check his blood sugar through a finger stick 10 to 14 times a day. We had to give him insulin, take insulin back, or not take insulin back, give him insulin, give him sugar. We had to do all these different things to just try to keep his blood sugar level, which usually involved either Lauren or I waking up multiple times a night. But now with this tandem pump, it talks to the sensor, it communicates, it essentially acts as it's like an artificial pancreas and helps to keep his blood sugar flat pretty much all day long. So real exciting things going on here. Do you have anything you want to say? Good. So really exciting. Do you want to say anything?
No.
Okay. So really exciting stuff going on. We want to thank everybody as always for donating to the JDRF because that money that you guys donate helps to fund the research and the technology to help make his life easier, our life easier, and the life easier for everybody who's dealing with type 1 diabetes. Any other comments?
No.
You're he's not the best color man in the league for nothing, folks. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, so that's what goes on in our family, as well as many other families that are affected with type 1 diabetes. Some of the things, and I'm sure you'll hear more later from Amy, but some of the things that we don't think about are Matthew going to school. What happens post 9/11? Children practice lockdowns. What happens if he's in music class in another room and there's a lockdown? He's not permitted to go get anything that he might need. So as a result, my daughter-in-law makes up lockdown boxes. A box for the art class, a box for music, a box for gym. And these are all given to the school in September. The nurse has a box. Matthew has an emergency kit. So all these things have to be considered. Is there juice? Is there candy? Is there a testing kit? Things, again, that we don't think about. And again, as David mentioned in the video, testing is done throughout the night sometimes before the sensor came available. And that means going in, sometimes he would wake up, sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes you test through the finger, sometimes you test through the toe. And fortunately, Matthew's a heavy sleeper and didn't wake up very often. But other times you would have to wake him up. If his blood sugar was too low, then you would have to wake him up to give him a glucose tablet to get the sugar back up. So it's a constant battle that has been made easier through technology and research. And that's why my goal is to go around and speak with different Lions clubs, possibly even bringing Matthew when I can. speaking to speaking to the clubs, telling them when they donate, where does their money go? We get involved with the walk at Liberty State Park. All different families affected by type 1 diabetes come, they create their own teams. Fortunately, we have had our Lions of New Jersey also participate in the Walk at Liberty State Park. We walk for Team Miracle for Matthew. Doesn't matter which team you walk for, because the money all goes to fund the research for juvenile diabetes. And as a result, we're raising money and it's having very, very positive effects. And I have also been working closely with Lion Donna Friedel on the Strides Walk. We have our convention, our Lion State Convention every year. And for the last 5 or 6 years, we organized a walk, and it's just a 1 mile walk, but we walk on the boardwalk, we raise more funds, and again, for juvenile diabetes research. And you can see the positive effects that the research and the new technology have on not just the person, but the whole family. Thank you.
Barbara, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for sharing. And please thank your son and grandson for that wonderful video that they let us share today. You gave me several ideas for our roundtable discussion at the end that I was making notes on. And when we're done all the formal presentations, we are going to invite you to give questions for our panel, and we'll be addressing things just sort of a one-on-one, as a group, how diabetes affects the whole family and the diabetic. But thank you, Barbara. Great job. Our next speaker is someone I've known for many, many years, Tom Deeney. He has been active in the battle against type 1 diabetes for most of his life, as he has been living with a diabetic family member since as a young child. His sister was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 4. And she's now 70 years old. So if you remember my timeline, many of the advances that make life easier are not were not available when Tom's sister was first diagnosed. And he knows that side of being a family member who has diabetes. She's now suffering many of the complications of the disease. In 1988, his son Brian was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 2. And like many parents with diabetic children, Brian's diagnosis spurred Tom to get even more involved in trying to defeat the disease. Since then, he's been actively involved in JDRF, both raising funds, and he's taken on many roles at the local chapter and at JDRF International in New York. Tom has chaired numerous fundraising events and held chapter leadership roles on the board and in various officer roles, up to chapter board president. At the international level, he has served on the audit committee and as a regional planned giving leader. In his professional career, Tom retired as vice president of corporate compliance for a Fortune 500 international manufacturing company. We're very happy and blessed to have Tom joining us today to both share his story, but also talk about JDRF and give you a lot of information. And so I'm going to turn this over to Tom now with my thanks for his giving us time today.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this symposium. As Donna said, I've been involved with JDRF for many years now, starting from when my son was participating in events when my sister was a diabetic, and then when my son was diagnosed. As most parents, when you have a child directly involved in something, it spurs you to step up to a larger level and to start to do more. So we started doing individual events like an annual beef and beer for 350 of our closest friends and family, a dance for the cure, things like that. Got involved in chapter events, started sharing the chapter events, doing all that thing over the years. And as Donna said, I've seen a lot of the progress that has come from the research funds that we've raised. So that kind of keeps me involved and keeps me going, and that's why I've been here all these many years. We can go back to my mother when my sister was diagnosed, and in the early years, having to boil the glass syringes and sharpening the needles on a stone. Excuse me, I still get emotional when I talk about these things. They've also named me the designated crier for the chapter. Whenever they want to get somebody a little emotional, they put me up and have me talk, and I kind of bring that emotion to the front there. But anyway, so I remember my mother struggling through all those, my sister going through a lot of the complications, and having that in my background kind of made the decision when my son was diagnosed to get even more involved, a more obvious decision. So, we've talked a little bit about some of the improvements that have happened over the years, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. But I will say that I have seen them firsthand with my son. His life is a lot easier now and more manageable now than my sister's ever was. He's got more technological advances available to him to help him manage his disease than she did. And if a lot of those that we're seeing come to market today, if they were available back when my son was diagnosed, I wouldn't have near as much gray hair as you see on me today. So there's a lot of good news coming out of everything that's coming on. So why don't we go to the first slide in my presentation? So, as I said, when my son was diagnosed, as a parent, you want to get involved in doing something to help their plight there. And there were many charities available to get involved in that do a lot of things around the diabetes. So why JDRF? It was kind of simple. I wanted to focus my efforts on funding research to find a cure for the disease. And JDRF, it was the leading non-government funder of medical research related to diabetes back then, and still is. Their vision is simple. They want to cure T1D, a world without T1D. And how they do that, improving lives today and tomorrow by accelerating life-changing breakthroughs to cure, prevent, and treat T1D and its complications. Early on, the mission was focused on pure research related to the disease, and it has evolved over the years to see that it's not going to be a simple answer. We're not going to get there quickly. So while we're doing this research to get to the end, we need to do things to help keep our type 1 diabetics healthy and alive, so that when we find those breakthroughs, that they're there to benefit from them. So now that there's a combined focus of research related to finding the cure for the disease, but also to improving lives and helping prevent complications as we go along. I'm sorry, I just saw a note about somebody saying they're glad they won't be the only person crying today. So I got involved with JDRF early on. Let's move to the next slide. So how does JDRF go about doing that? There's really two primary areas. As I said, the curing T1D and the improving lives. On the curing side, they break it down a little further into the disease-modifying therapies. That's where we're looking at research that either corrects the disease or prevents the disease from progressing. And as we know, most type 1 diabetes cases are because of an immune system attacking the beta cells in the pancreas and destroying those cells, and thereby destroying their capability to produce insulin. So a lot of the research is geared at looking at the immune system and how that's operating and trying to correct that. And then the other side of that curing is to provide replacement beta cells to produce insulin, either through insulin cells in the body, in the person's own body, or by adding insulin producing cells. And then there's a new area that Donna talked about a little bit, the global universal screening, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. On the improving lives side, better, smaller, less intrusive devices, and you saw that, and I'm drawing a blank on what the child's name was, but the combination of a small continuous glucose monitor device that communicates with a small insulin pump and adjusts insulin is a brand new item. Both those devices have been operating independently. In the past, you would take the information from the monitor, you would make the adjustments to the insulin pump. Now they're doing direct communications and adjusting it automatically to kind of take that burden away from you and let things happen a little quicker too. Better insulin and drugs to combine with insulin. Insulin, years past was an animal-derived insulin, and you gave the person what you thought was the right amount of insulin for the activity and food that you anticipated they were going to eat and participate in during the day. And then it was a delicate balance of the insulin, the activity, the food, the emotions, the weather, everything else. You kind of have to, it's balancing a many faceted plane on top of a pin where anything that tips in any direction could throw you out of whack. Insulins have gotten better now, and the next generation of insulin hopefully will be reactive insulin, that it can sit there not acting until it's needed, that it senses when the blood sugars are getting higher and the insulin activates itself. So you have less worry about severe low blood sugars. Drugs for other complications. There's been a big advancement in the area of drugs to treat things like kidney disease and eye disease related to diabetes complications. And then a new area that JDRF has moved into in the past several years is therapies for the psychosocial burden. For years we were focused on the medical issues and tended to ignore the severe burdens that dealing with type 1 diabetes does to a family, in terms of how you deal with all the stress around that. And JDRF is doing more in that area. And I'll talk a little bit about that on the next one. Next slide. I'll talk about that in a future slide. So let's talk a little bit about the monies. How does JDRF make an impact? What's the size of what we've been doing? Over the years, since its founding in 1970, JDRF has raised over $2 billion of funding for medical research. That's a big number. And I'm extremely proud of that number. Today, we have currently 300 plus active research grants going on. There's 300 different research projects related to type 1 diabetes going on at the moment. We also have a big volunteer lobbying arm to continue to lobby with the federal government and local governments to provide research funds. And a big piece of that comes from the National Institutes of Health, the $2.8 billion worth of funding that's come to diabetes-related research from the National Institutes of Health. And JDRF has a strong role in coordinating all that research too, in making sure that we're not all spending money on the same things. We coordinate with federal funding and with a lot of other private funders to make sure that we're all doing a piece and our pieces are working together and not overlapping, and we're not losing a lot. We're having significant gaps between the research. And a new area over the past decade is the clinical trials. In the past, JDRF did a lot of medical research and saw a lot of advancements in that research. But then the research kind of hits a wall, and you have to get it out into the clinical studies, which take an enormous amount of money and a big commitment from companies. So a lot of things were moving along and then not getting out into clinical studies and not ultimately reaching the patients. So JDRF has moved a lot of our support now to kind of pushing things through the full pipeline. We address the primary research. We help move it into clinical studies. As the studies are completing, we also spend a lot of time educating doctors to make sure that these developments get into the practice and into patients' use. Excuse me. There's a number of things that came along that the products were there, but they weren't being used because the doctors weren't familiar enough with them. So we're spending a lot of time in that, and we're also spending time now in convincing the Medicare and the insurance companies to cover all these new products and to provide choices to the type 1 diabetics. So there's a lot of money involved in this, and there's money going a lot of different directions, but it's all doing good things for the community. Next slide. And moving on. So when we talk about the cure therapies, what are we talking about? The first area is turning off the immune system from attacking the insulin cells. And an interesting point here is that in the past, again, I'm going to say a decade, JDRF has started working more with other disease researchers. And in this area specifically, cancer researchers, and in the area of the immune system. JDRF is looking at trying to turn off the immune system or turn it down so that it doesn't attack the beta cells. On the other hand, the cancer researchers are trying to stimulate the immune system and turn it on to attack the cancer cells. So we're both doing a lot of research and looking at those control mechanisms around the immune systems, and we've started working together so that we both benefit from the research the other one's doing to get to those answers. Excuse me. I see my spring allergies are really kicking in these days. And then the other area we're looking at is creating and sustaining beta cells, finding ways to stimulate the body to create new beta cells, and finding ways to introduce beta cells into the body and then protect them when they're there to keep them from being destroyed again. Next slide. Disease-modifying therapies. What kind of breakthroughs have we been having? And I'll only talk about these briefly. The teplizumab, and it's always interesting to try and pronounce new drugs as they come onto the market. Is a drug that Donna referred to a little bit that they've now identified that can delay the onset of type 1 diabetes. And a person starts developing type 1 diabetes years before they start showing the symptoms. There's proteins that that are involved in once it becomes active, and for years you can be slowly moving towards a type 1 diabetes issue. But you need a trigger event that kind of throws you into high gear or puts you over the hurdle. I'm sorry. So this is a drug that they've identified that slows down that process and delays the onset of diabetes for 2 to 3 additional years. And that has a big impact on both reducing later complications or giving you time for new benefits to come to market and new technologies to be developed. So that's a big area of current emphasis. And the other area is JAK inhibitors, and I forget what the JAK stands for. It's a long term, but those are things that will protect beta cells from being attacked by the immune system. Next slide. Yeah, actually I have some. My daughter just brought me some cough drops. So when we talk about cell therapies, it's developing a reliable source of new beta cells, either within the person's own body. They're finding ways to stimulate other cells to convert or manufacture new beta cells, or to bring in donated cells, and then how to support them and so that they thrive in the body and shield them from being attacked. And that shielding involves, 2 technologies, with both the drug treatment technology to try and protect them, but also physical barriers to try and protect them. They are working on a number of projects that involve small packaging where they can put the cells into a package that will protect it from the immune system and insert that small package into the body somewhere. And then the beta cells can thrive without being attacked and can produce insulin and effectively become a cure for diabetes. Next slide. And two of the big areas in here, companies that have come forward, they're in the clinical trial phase and have moved along and are getting near to proposing FDA approvals on things are ViaCyte and Vertex. Vertex, through its acquisition of Sema Therapies, both of which have been funded by JDRF for a number of years to get them where they're going. So we're starting to see some real benefits from this. An interesting part of this is that as JDRF got to the point of how do we stimulate clinical trials, they decided they needed to participate with the companies in funding those trials. And if you're going to do that and give a company a leg up in getting their products to market, there are a lot of implications to doing that. So JDRF formed a separate fund and has a number of contributors that have contributed large dollars into that fund, and that fund is used to support some of these clinical trials and with companies. And in doing so, that fund effectively takes a piece of ownership or future benefit from the work, so that when ViaCyte and Vertex bring these to market, JDRF gets back funding out of that process, either on an ongoing basis or on a one-time basis, to help fund future research. Next slide. And moving over to the improving lives area. And this is one we've probably talked about a little bit more, or that people are more familiar with. First area, the better, smaller, less intrusive devices. It covers the whole gamut of diabetes, the blood sugar monitoring from the test strips. My sister used the urine test strips as an indicator of that, told you how much her blood sugar was over the past 6 to 12 hours. And based on that, then you decided, whether you should increase or decrease the insulin for the next 10 to 12 hours. Not very scientific. As Donna mentioned, the able to do an at-home blood test to tell your sugar in a short period of time was a huge advancement and a big success for helping keep children healthy during this time period, especially young children that can't tell you how they're feeling or can't tell you that they're having problems. The blood tests were a huge role there. Insulin pumps rather than injections. Better insulins, we talked about that a little bit, and other drugs that help you use insulin better, or that there's a new drug that they've developed that's gotten great use in the type 2 diabetes community, that they're now looking as a type 1 treatment too, that a normal body, once your blood sugar hits 200, it will start spilling over the excess sugars into your urine to get rid of it. There's a family of drugs now that will reduce that level of 200 down to a lower level, so that you keep your blood sugars in a more manageable area. So that's got the ability to help type 1 diabetics keep their blood sugars in a more normal range. There are all drawbacks to doing that, and one of the things they found is that people tend to, once they see that, they will use too much of that drug, so that they reduce their need for insulin, thinking that's a good thing, but your body needs insulin for other reasons other than converting blood sugar. So the FDA is slow to approve that for type 1 diabetics, because of that reason. They don't want them to stop taking insulin. And then we look at drugs for complications. The two big areas are kidney complications and the eye complications that many diabetics have. An interesting personal experience. My sister for years was having eye problems related, as a complication of diabetes, and getting the laser treatments on her eyes and slowly going blind over the years. And she was also having blood pressure problems and kidney problems. And they put her on a drug for her blood pressure that, as she was taking it, her eye problems started decreasing. And they didn't really realize that connection at the time. And there was a lot of studies done right around that time of looking at that connection. And it finds that drug does protect the eyes for other reasons they weren't aware of. And it opened up a whole new area there. And I think the treatment of eye disease for type 1 diabetics has gotten dramatic increases over the years. And then we talked about therapies for the psychosocial burden. And if we move to the next slide. And again, excuse me for the coughing. So on a psychological burden, psychosocial burden, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, there's this chart there where JDRF funded a large study of the NICH. Let me make sure I get the right word for this now. It's a novel interventions in children's health care, where it was a program that combined medical care with behavioral therapies in a large group of population. And what they found was that when they do that, the incidence of hospital stays and medical costs and things like that related to the treatment of the type 1 diabetic resulted in huge reductions in those costs and hospital stays and things like that. So that work now is the basis for getting insurance companies and Medicare and those kind of organizations to accept that behavioral therapy is a significant piece of the T1D treatment program, and there's a movement to try and combine those things and make it reimbursable cost and things like that. So the top left corner, the artificial pancreas systems is the term for when you have a continuous glucose monitor that speaks to an insulin pump, and they exchange information and control the insulin dosing related to that. At the moment, those systems are only dealing with insulin dosing, but in the development stage, in the clinical trial stage, are pumps that will be dual pumps that will pump not only insulin but also the other. I just drew a blank on the other protein that glucagon, the glucagon type treatments, so that if your blood sugar drops too low for another reason, the pump can administer glucagon automatically as well. So I think those will be coming out in the near future too, or I don't know about near future, but in the future. I talked a little bit about the novel insulins. There's a number of different companies developing those type of insulins. And the adjunct therapies are drugs that treat different aspects of T1D and now are seen as complementary to insulin treatments or things like that, or looking at becoming complementary treatments. Next slide. And then moving into the T1 Detect. So as I said, they've identified a number of proteins that become active as the body begins the process towards becoming a T1 type 1 diabetic. So If you can test and screen for those and tell when a person starts expressing those proteins, you know that their probability of developing type 1 diabetes has just gone up significantly and will continue to rise. It's not a predictor of a timeline, so you can display those for years, or you can display them for a short time before you become a type 1 diabetic. But all the research indicates that it's very high probability that once you start expressing those, at some point you're going to become a type 1 diabetic. So why is that important? For two reasons. Historically, most patients are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when they're at a severely high blood sugar. They end up in the hospital. It's a surprise to everybody. It's been going on for a while, and there's a correlation between historically there's a correlation between the high blood sugar at diagnosis, the higher it is, and the complications you see later on. Now, I don't want people to think that because I was diagnosed with a high blood sugar recently that I'm doomed to these complications, because the historic data doesn't show all the other improvements that we found in managing diabetes too. So while that was a trend in the past, it may have been modified by some of the other benefits as well. But it's a trend that if you can avoid that, it makes your prognosis for the future that much better. So there's a benefit to screen people so that they know that that's coming, and they're more prepared to recognize the symptoms as they develop the disease, and can treat it a little earlier than they might otherwise. And then the other reason is it gives you a chance to educate and learn before you're thrown into that. Many people have no familiarity with type 1 diabetes. They're diagnosed and now they're in the hospital and they have to deal with all this counting carbs and injecting insulin or going on a pump and all that. It's at the same time, and it's a very difficult and stressful period. So you avoid that a little bit by knowing in advance. And by combining it with the treatments we talked about earlier, where there's drug treatments and other treatments that can delay the onset. Once you've identified that you're a candidate or that you're displaying these proteins, then you look at whether or not you want to get in some of these clinical studies or treatment programs to delay it even further. And it gives you an opportunity to benefit from things that are in the pipeline now of development. There may be benefits that come to market sooner, that if you delay the onset of this, you will be able to benefit from them when you wouldn't previously. So T1D detect, if you move to the next scene, the next slide. Just recently, these at-home tests have come to the market where it's a simple blood test you can do with a finger prick, do multiple spots on this test, send it back in. You can get a result that indicates whether or not you have any of these antibodies or proteins present. And then, they can guide you towards information to interpreting what that means, having one, having two, having three of them, and what the different options are for you. I just got a number of these kits for my grandchildren. With my children's involvement, you have to have a parent involved to test a child for anything. So I, with my children, I got these test kits for my grandchildren so that they would know and that we could keep an eye on them, and we will probably get them tested periodically through their life, even if they're not displaying anything now. We'll repeat the test periodically because, you may not have any of the proteins now, and 3 years from now, you may be displaying some. So I'm a personal proponent of this testing. I think it can be very valuable. I think there has to be some education to go along with it because, like anything, if you learn that you're potentially susceptible or probable that you're going to end up with a disease, sometimes that's hard to deal with. So I think you need to include education and things along with it as well. But it can be a very valuable tool, and it seems to be in line with the Lions' emphasis on screening for diseases and managing diseases and things like that. I thought that was a good fit for the JDRF and Lions session here. So I believe, is there another slide? I think that was the end. Oh, JDRF has a screening page if you want to go on and order that. When I got the kits, I believe they were $55 per kit for the grandchildren. But there's the website that you can go and get more information and order the kits if you want to do those. So again, that's the end of my formal presentation. Again, I apologize for all the coughing. I do have significant spring allergies, and they seem to have jumped a lot this morning. And I'll be glad to handle any questions and answers later as we get to that session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, for that fantastic presentation, and also for persevering despite, it's hard when that kind of thing comes on. We're going to make a shift right now, and I'm thrilled to be introducing Lion Amy Green and her daughter Layla, who will be talking about the impact of diabetes and their story. Layla is a vivacious, smart, and loving 10-year-old. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 17 months. So you beat my family. We were 18 months, but that's incredible. She almost lost her life, and she's doing beautifully now. But you don't get over that, do you, Amy? She began speaking about diabetes with her mom, Amy, at the age of 3. She has attended and spoken at numerous Lions Club International meetings, conventions, and events. She's also a pod advocate with the Omnipod Insulin Pump Corporation. She enjoys the beach, skimboarding, rollerblading, biking, and hanging out with her friends. And yet, despite all the fun things she could be doing today, she's waiting for her turn to speak today. We're thrilled and grateful to her. And I want to note that at the age of 10, she is already the recipient of a Melvin Jones Fellow Award. So congratulations on that. Her mom, Amy Green, is a wife, a homeschooling mom to her 2 daughters, Layla and Lindley, and an advocate for type 1 diabetes. She was born and raised in Tennessee, but she now lives in Florida. Her advocacy for type 1 began after her daughter Layla was diagnosed in 2012, as we noted, at 17 months. She began working with the Manchester, Tennessee Lions Club in 2013, speaking about Layla's diagnosis, promoting awareness of type 1 diabetes. Between the years of 2013 and 2017, she spoke at multiple meetings and district conventions within the state of Tennessee, the JDRF Summer Soiree, as well as the Tennessee State Convention. During that time, she also orchestrated 2 5K events where over $7,000 was raised. $4,000 was donated to JDRF and $3,000 to the Tennessee Camp for Diabetic Children, and I'm hoping she'll talk more about that. Oh my gosh, the cough is contagious. Excuse me. In 2017, Lions Club International released a short documentary about her family's experience with diabetes, which led to her being invited to speak at the United Nations meeting with Lions Club International, as well as the Lions Club International Convention in Las Vegas in 2018. Since then, she's spoken at Lion meetings and conventions in Florida, participated in the Lions Club International Telethon, and spoken at Lions Club Diabetes Symposium hosted in New Jersey today. And we feel greatly honored and thrilled to have them with us. I also like to note that Amy is the recipient of the International President's Award, which is one of the highest awards that can be awarded by Lions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Layla and Lion Amy. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
We are so thankful to be here, and we can't wait to share some information with you guys, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Layla's story, and I'm so glad that Tom cried before I did, because typically I'm the one who cries at all of this stuff.
He really does.
This story it never gets any easier to tell, because we relive those moments that I'm about to talk about. So at 12 months, Layla stopped growing. We were referred to an endocrinologist in hopes of finding a growth hormone deficiency, but instead found an iron deficiency. And so we were given supplements, sent home, told us everything was going to be just fine. She continued to get worse. We went back a couple times, and they tested different things, different blood tests and things like that, and said, they gave her different kinds of supplements every time we went, and said, this will do it. This will be it. This is, she's going to be fine. And mommy instinct just quickly kicked in, that something just wasn't quite right. And I didn't think it was exactly what the doctors were telling me. And so as time went by, she just got a lot worse. She stopped growing. She really wasn't talking. She wasn't walking. And at this point was probably around 14 or 15 months old. And so I was a little bit concerned. I was pregnant with my second daughter, Lindley, at the time. And so, I think everybody thought I was just being a little bit emotional and pregnant. But I just knew something wasn't quite right. So I started doing research online, and all of the symptoms that Layla had at that time were listed as type 1 on Google. I had never heard of type 1 diabetes. I'd only heard of type 2. And so I really didn't think that would be it, because it's not very typical that a child gets diagnosed quite as young as Layla. So I kind of just let it go. But she continued to get worse. And on June 2nd of 2012, she became so lethargic that I couldn't wake her up. So just so happened we had a glucose monitor at home. My husband was away with the military, so it was just me. I checked her sugar just to get it really out of my mind. I didn't think it was diabetes, and the meter simply read high. That moment changed our life forever. I took her to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes within an hour. And that was really hard. She was 17 months old. She was 15 pounds, and she was in 6 to 9 month clothing. The doctor told us that day that if I had not brought her in on that Saturday morning, that she would have been gone by Monday. And we're so thankful that she's here with us. So her sugar was almost 700. We were in the hospital for a week learning how to take care of Layla, how to check sugar, how to give insulin, how to carb count, how to administer glucagon, which could save her life. Her father was called in by the military to come in, so he was able to join us that week, thankfully, so we could kind of learn how to take care of Layla and what our new life was going to be like. So type 1 is an autoimmune disease, of course, and unlike type 2, there's no cure. So her pancreas no longer functions, and without insulin, she will die. And that's just, I know that's a strong sentence, but without insulin, she will die. And so our world now revolves around diabetes, not just her world, but as a family, our world revolves around her needs and taking care of her. And we are grateful for that opportunity. But it's a lot of carb counting, a lot of sugar checks, food weighing, all of that kind of stuff. That is her daily routine. It has really significantly impacted how our family goes about our daily routine. We wake up in the morning and we check sugar. That's the first thing we do. We give insulin for her breakfast. We also have a Dexcom that was in the video earlier, a continuous glucose monitor. So we watch that all day for highs or lows. Prior to having that, we were checking 10 to 12 times a day. And so again, at lunchtime, we're checking sugar, we're counting carbs, we're giving insulin. Anytime she eats, we're counting carbs and we're giving insulin. If she's high, we're giving corrections. If she's low, then we're stopping activity, whatever that may be, and we're treating those lows as well. So it really greatly impacts our life. And, and we have good days and we have bad days. We have great days. And then we have nighttime. Nighttime is really difficult, especially as a mom, because Layla doesn't wake up for lows at this point. And it's actually really hard to wake her up when she's having lows, which is pretty scary for me. So, I may be up all night. I may only get a couple hours of sleep some nights, especially when we have the bad nights. But so thank God for Dexcom, because Dexcom does alarm and alert us when she's having lows. And so that's great. She's also on the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump system. And that just delivers insulin. I think a lot of people look at an insulin pump and think, oh, your life is so much easier. Everything is just great now. You don't have to do as much work. But really, we still are doing the work. The only thing that does, excuse me, is take away from her getting the actual shot. So we change that Omnipod every 3 days. It administers insulin when we tell it to, and also creates a basal rate for her to keep insulin in her system all the time so that she doesn't go into DKA, which is very scary too. We have had instances in the past where we've had to call an ambulance, call 911. Layla passed out. I could not wake her, and this was after fighting low blood sugar for about 45 minutes. I did the best I could. At the time, she was throwing up, and so anything I gave her, she was throwing up, and so I was unable to get her sugar high enough. So I had to give her a glucagon in her leg, which was very scary because it was only, she wasn't even 2 at the time. And so that's super scary. She was taken to the hospital via ambulance and given a glucose drip in order to get her up and keep her safe. And so that's something we deal with all the time, not giving glucagons, but just lows and blood sugar and stuff like that. Lots of things affect Layla's blood sugar. I think a lot of people don't realize how much affects her levels, whether it go high or low. It can be weather, it can be mood, the amount of sleep you get, how much she's growing, if she has growth hormone increase, if she's in a bad mood. Like, there's all these things that really do affect a lot. Basically, every day is different. So she could eat the same exact thing and have the same exact schedule every single day, and her numbers would never be the same. And that's just because of the amount of things that affect their glucose levels. So that really makes it harder to deal with. But I think that with Lions Club and being able to speak to everybody and share our story and educate people about type 1, and I think it's given Layla a voice, and as well as myself. I know I dealt with a lot of depression when she was first diagnosed because I was still pregnant with my second one. I had a really hard time trying to, acknowledge that this was our new life. And I remember the social worker coming into the hospital before we were discharged from being diagnosed. And she said, it is okay to grieve the child you just lost because she will never be the same. That was so hard, but it was so true because Layla was never going to be the same. Now, is she better than she was before? Probably, because going through what she's gone through has made her so much stronger. It's made us stronger. And I think it's just made us more aware of things, and it's given us a purpose and give us an opportunity to do big things in life.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
So we've enjoyed so much of the opportunities, just like today. So what I would like to talk about is more about how it affects you, Layla. So how does diabetes make you feel, like, on a daily basis, the good, the bad,
Sometimes I feel sad, I feel mad when I have pod changes in my mind. I feel scared, but I know it's not gonna hurt because I'm pretty used to it. I definitely started eating healthier than I used to, and that's making my sugar better and steadier. And yeah, life's been going good.
Yeah. So do you feel like diabetes stops you from doing anything that you want to do?
No, I think I feel pretty free. Maybe sometimes when I go to the beach, because when my sugar is like high or low, sometimes I can't go into the water or like just go play with my friends or something. That kind of just makes me sad. I just want to go home and go cry.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the harder things is being around her friends who are normal, that don't have type 1. I think that's difficult. Although her friends have been great and they all understand what she goes through, and they're so good at helping her and sitting with her when she has a low. So we're so grateful for the friends she has, but it does still make her feel different when everybody's at the beach and we're playing in the water and Layla has to come out and stop her activity in order to, treat a low and make sure her, sugar goes up before she goes back in. So it does affect her all the time. And I think that emotionally affects her as well because she does feel different. And she's told me that before, that she does feel different from other people. But what are some good things that you think have come out of diabetes?
Well, I'm glad they made up all these new pumps. I'm glad I have the tubeless pump now. Since I was little, they started making like a new Dexcom that goes better. And for some reason, my favorite part of the day is when I go low and I get to have like all this sugar. I just love it.
She really does love candy. So yeah, she sometimes really enjoys those lows because she gets to have a little extra treat. Now she can have anything she wants. That's a misconception that diabetes, patients, type 1 patients need to have a strict diet. She does not need to have a strict diet, especially as a child. Her body still needs carbs in order to grow. And so she can have anything she wants within reason. Nobody needs cake every single day. So we, let her be as normal as possible. We go to birthday parties and we have birthday cake. As long as we can carb count and give her insulin for the things that she's wanting, it's okay. Like she can still eat candy on Halloween. She can still eat birthday cake. She can still, be just like the rest of her friends for the most part. And we try to really emphasize that and we try to make her life as normal as possible in order for her to not feel so different. One of the things that she has been able to do is go to diabetes camp here in Florida. When we moved out here, she was eligible per her age to go. And I think that was a big deal. I know it's been touched on before I spoke about not doing things like sleepovers and date nights for me and my husband. Those are few and far between because we don't have anyone who can take care of Layla, unfortunately. And at this age, that's, it's hard. You don't want to give her that much of a responsibility, although she does do all of her own care. So it's hard. We don't have date nights. We don't have sleepovers unless they come to our house. We don't, our family is far away in Tennessee, so we don't get the opportunity. But with camp, she gets to spend an entire week away with all type 1 friends and doctors and nurses who take care of her and give her the opportunity to feel normal around other type 1 kids, do normal activities, and give me and her dad respite once a year, and also her sister. We focus on her sister that week and give her little sister a lot more attention because she takes the back seat to a lot of the diabetes care. So I will let Layla tell you a little bit about camp.
Camp is like one of my favorite things in the year. And yes, how you're feeling like you give Lily some more attention. Sometimes I feel bad for me taking all the attention because I don't want her to feel bad that she thinks like I'm the spot. Like I'm just in the spotlight like whenever. Yeah. And I love camp. I've made so many good friends. It's like what I was saying. It's like my favorite part of the year. And this year I'm going to a new camp, which I'm really excited about. And I really like the camps here in Florida because back in Tennessee, I was too young to go to any camps. They're all like probably like my age or up to go. And here in Florida, like as long as you're like 5 or up, you're good to go to camp. I mean, it's awesome and I love it so much.
What kind of stuff do you do at camp?
Let's see. I go kayaking, fishing, playground, art. It's kind of hard to remember.
There's a lot of stuff.
Over 2 years ago, so I'm trying to remember.
So because of the pandemic, she was unable to attend this summer. They had to cancel it. So we look forward to when she can actually go again. But that's something that she really enjoys and something that we really enjoy too. And we're grateful. And I think that's an easy opportunity for Lions specifically to help. It seems so simple to raise funds and to sponsor a child to go to diabetes camp, once a year, even just one kid a year. That makes a big difference because there are a lot of medical costs that come up with, insulin and pump supplies and Dexcom supplies and low treatments. And there's a ton of expenses, medical expenses. And, we are in a great position with great insurance. And so we're very, very blessed. Not everyone has it quite as well as we do. And so that's an easy, simple opportunity for you guys to help. You could just sponsor a child for camp. And that is a big, big deal, especially, and it's not just for the kid, it's for the family as well. I think it's so emotionally beneficial for them to feel normal, but also for, the mom and dad and the rest of the family to get a little bit of downtime and to not have to focus so much on diabetes for a little bit. So I hope we have kind of covered everything that Donna wanted us to. Is there anything specifically that you wanted to say?
No, I didn't think so.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy and Layla. You have been awesome and really fantastic in highlighting some of the important issues. We're going to move into our roundtable shortly, but I do want to talk about something that you made me think of. Amy said that without insulin, her child would die. And for all of us who spoke today, Tom and Barbara, myself, Amy, without insulin, our children would die. And the trouble is, here in the United States, insulin is incredibly expensive. And if you're not blessed to have really good insurance, like Amy mentioned, insulin can cost a fortune. It can run over $1,000 a month to get enough insulin to keep a diabetic alive. And that is a disgrace. There has been, when insulin was first invented, they didn't take a patent on it because they wanted it to be available for all diabetics. They wanted to have that experience that the diabetic, they went from the children in the coma that I talked about in the ward to getting up out of bed and waking up when they thought that would never happen again. Sadly, with insurance issues that we have in this country, diabetics have died. Diabetics have been forced in the position of deciding whether to pay the rent or buy their insulin. And here in New Jersey, we've had a new act has been making its way through the legislature. There's co-sponsors of Assemblyman Karabinchik, Armato, and I might say this wrong, Quinjano bill. And what it is to limit the amount that can be charged as a copay. The initial bill limited it to $100 per month, a month's supply, which again can run thousands of dollars. The limited, and actually the Senate amended the bill to limit it to $50. So that is something a little more within reach to people who have insurance. And it's now making its way. It's going to be presented for a vote in the Senate, and then it will make its way to Governor Murphy's desk. But what's important here for everyone, especially if you're not in New Jersey, you can advocate. You can get involved with your local JDRF chapter or just start contacting your elected representatives. I want to note that this bill only affects plans that are regulated by the state. For federal insurance plans, there's no such law. And one thing you can do is contact your congressperson or your federal senators and tell them we need legislation to make insulin affordable for everyone. So, because insurance doesn't always cover it, and it also is very high even when it's partially covered. So we need that to be fixed. Now what we're going to do is move into a sort of roundtable discussion with all our panelists and address some of the topics that people don't also often think about when it comes to diabetes. Everyone here has a diabetic in their family. Layla is a diabetic, but until you lived with it, even if you knew about type 1 diabetes, you may not have realized the many areas that it impacts. I'll invite you to put questions or comments in the comment screen so that, and I would ask Lion Mahesh to let me know any specific comments. But just to start it out, I know that Amy homeschools Layla. So I'm going to toss out maybe to Barbara and Tom. What issues have you found with your diabetic children being in school? And how has that affected them?
From what I know about my grandson, there, in the younger grades, he had to have an aid, specifically because he couldn't always feel the lows or the highs. And it affected his schooling, whether he could stay on task, whether he could stay focused. So there was an aid in the room. Again, prior to the sensor being on his arm, you were never sure unless he was taken down to the nurse to have his finger pricked. So constant in and out of the classroom. And he doesn't like to be singled out, so that made things difficult. And again, the big thing was gym class. That always affected his numbers, how much running they were doing. Check sugar before, go to the nurse before gym class, and again after gym class, before lunch, after lunch. And fortunately, with the sensor, things are a lot easier because the nurse has the app right on her phone. And the parents have the app on their phone. I have the app. And my son could be on business in California and still look at the app and see what his son's blood sugar is. So it's just, technology has just come so far.
When Brian was young, we, at the beginning of every school year, we made sure that we met with and developed a relationship with the school nurses, and Brian's older sisters always volunteered in the school's nurses' offices as their activity while they're in school, so that we always maintained a very close relationship with them, and that helped immensely in getting Brian through those early school years. We were blessed with some very, very good school nurses, and together with them, we put on some education sessions for the school district, for the nurses in all the schools. So it really became a family thing, and I highly recommend taking that approach. Always be as friendly as you can with your school nurses.
Our grandson's school now has a yearly walk for juvenile diabetes, and they walk around their parking lot and their playground. They raise money, and there's more awareness now.
Thank you both. We do have a question. Oh, good, Amy and Layla are back. Tom, this might be something that you might have more knowledge on. Patel asked, we do heart transplants, liver transplants, kidney transplants. Is anyone doing pancreas transplants?
Yes, typically pancreas transplants are done in conjunction with a kidney transplant. So they rarely do a pancreas transplant by itself, because once you do a transplant, then you're subject to immune suppressant drugs for the rest of your life. And that has a lot of complications that tend to be a little more severe than the potential complications of diabetes. So they generally don't do a pancreas alone. But if you get to a point where you're having kidney issues, which are common in diabetics, when you get to the point where you have to have a kidney transplant, they will usually do a kidney and pancreas transplant at the same time. And when you go through that, then you're no longer diabetic. So from that perspective, it's good, but you're subject to the immune suppressant drugs.
Another question, and this is, glad someone asked this. Thank you, Lion Varsha. Is type 1 diabetics genetic? And it's really two questions. And what are the common symptoms for type 1 diabetes? I'll just start with the first part, and anyone can jump in. But when my son was diagnosed, and he almost died because we didn't have any other diabetics in the family, so the medical professionals we were taking him to believed that it couldn't be possible for him to be a diabetic. And so, again, diabetes has a genetic component. Would you agree, Tom and Barbara, Amy? But it's not definitive that someone is going to get diabetes if it's in the family.
Yeah, there is a diabetic, there's a genetic predisposition, I think, to diabetes that may make you more susceptible, but it's not a determining factor. And more there are diagnoses with people with no history or no identification. And they haven't, I don't think they've identified a specific gene determinant that has any indication that you will or will not be susceptible.
And I'd say that my son got it, they said, from a cold, but then my daughter got it 8 years later. And right when we decided that, that wasn't in the family, but we do have 2 diabetics in our family. Tom has 2 diabetics in his family. The other question, and I think all of us can sort of talk about this because we saw it firsthand, and sometimes medical professionals don't jump on what this is. What are the signs of type 1 diabetes?
I would love to answer that. So with Layla, she, like I said, she'd stopped growing. So she just wasn't normal. Then she became very tired. She was drinking a lot. She was peeing a lot. There was several symptoms that came into play. And all of these symptoms I took to her pediatrician specifically and said, hey, she's peeing a lot. And he said, oh, well, it's summertime and she's drinking more. Or, whatever she had an infection when she was, we were at the pediatrician one day before she was diagnosed and sent to the hospital. And the pediatrician told me that it was a bacterial infection from swimming in pools, when in fact it was a yeast infection from all of the urine, from her urine, from the sugar in her urine. So all of these things were telltale signs, but that even our pediatrician did not pick up on, which is, that's disheartening. I wish that people would think about the signs and symptoms and just do a simple check. That's all it takes, to know. But yeah, I think that was the most. It was she was very ill. She was very unhappy. She was 17 months old. So it was hard to tell if she was being a toddler or if she was, being, diabetic. But yeah, so for us, that's what the experience was.
Yeah, the symptoms are common to a lot of other things, so they are often overlooked. And even, me and my wife with an older sister who was type 1 diabetic, we did not recognize the early symptoms with our son. He was drinking a lot. He was complaining about his legs being tired and things like that. And we kept attributing it to other things until, finally we were changing them once I looked down and he had lost a lot of weight. You just kind of hit yourself in the head and say, wait, why didn't I notice this?
When my daughter was, when my son was diagnosed, and they actually told us there was a very good chance he would survive the night. That's how bad it was. We're similar to Layla's situation. But your whole life changes. And you're thinking, and one of the things, I've been taking him to the doctor every other day and then every day. And when he was finally diagnosed, which was kind of by accident, they just threw a blood sugar test in with all the other tests they were running when he was pretty much lethargic and not responsive. And they said to me, why didn't you bring this child to a doctor sooner? And we thought, I even asked if he could have been diabetic because he had all the classic symptoms of weight loss, lethargy, excessive thirst. We couldn't keep a diaper on him enough. We were changing his diaper every hour. And as moms and grandmoms, I don't know about, probably your wife would feel this more, you feel that it's your fault. And one of the things that you have to understand about type 1 diabetes is it's not your fault. You can't prevent your child from becoming diabetic. You just keep your eyes out. But we tested, my daughter was, I was sharing with Barbara that I probably wouldn't have had any more children had I had the choice. But I found out I was pregnant the night my son was diagnosed and was freaking out totally. So that it made it easier. But one of the things, we tested that poor child weekly for diabetes. And then we finally got to the point where, okay, she's good. She's not going to have diabetes. And it took a friend of mine to say, you know, Mary keeps going to the bathroom. We were in the movies and she went to the bathroom every 20 minutes. Maybe could she have diabetes too? And by that point she was 8 and we kind of relaxed and didn't look for it. You know, she had lost some weight and we think, oh, well, that's good. She's a girl, you know, she's trying to lose weight. And so we were totally shocked. Fortunately, she wasn't as ill, so we found it sooner with her. But it's still, it kind of falls on the family and the parents to look for this. It's something pediatricians often miss and other people. I want to turn the topic a little bit now to, Amy mentioned this, and I want to say, Barbara, as a grandmother, is a real blessing to her son because she knows how to take care of a diabetic child. But when you don't have a family member who's willing to step up, some of our family was terrified at the idea of having sole care of the diabetic child. You know, so when the one child could go on sleepovers with grandparents and the other one couldn't. Barbara, can you talk a little bit about what you did to learn how to take care of your grandson when you're with him?
I took a lot of notes. I had things in front of me in black and white, and I would write down step by step how to program the pump, how to put in the carbs, everything. And I have another list, which I still have to this day, a quick look. How many carbs in an Oreo cookie? How many carbs in a chicken nugget from Wendy's? All that is written down. And I would go down and I would stand there and watch them take care of him. Watch them do it over and over until I could do it myself. In the beginning, when he had to be before the pump and he had to be given injections, that was like a nightmare for me. I would give learn to do it, give the injection, and then cry. And it was very difficult. And it's a little easier now, especially now that he's 11, he's starting to take care of himself. But it's he comes here, he sleeps over, and I still can't sleep. Like now with the new sensor and the new pump, it's my son and daughter-in-law can go during the night without getting up 4 times. And because the alert is on the phone, and I have the alert, but I still don't. I get up during the night and I check him just because I'm his grandmother. And it's just different. It's different to be taking care of them. They are your responsibility. But you step up and you do it.
Bless you for that. We have a question from Tracy Marshall. Is vitamin D supplementation included as part of the treatment? In my experience, it's been recommended for other things like a vitamin D deficiency, but it's not specifically a diabetic type 1 treatment. Anyone else want to speak to that?
That's my experience as well.
That was one of the things prior to her diagnosis was they wanted her on vitamin D supplements, but they also did like iron supplements, vitamin D supplements. It was something different every time we went in. But that was one of the things that we did do prior to her diagnosis.
Layla, the question's been directed to you by Andrew. Is how are your friends to you? And do you want to talk to that about how friends react to you being diabetic?
Yes, they're really nice to me. If I can't go into the water, usually at least one of them would stay out with me. And they would care for me when I'm low. They know when I'm low because they know my symptoms. They They drag me out of the water. They carry me on their back or something, and they carry me to my mom. Yeah, so they're really good about me having it.
And that's important for all of the type 1 diabetics, that they need kind of like a buddy who's going to be around to say that they're having a low sugar. And something that Amy and Barbara haven't gone through yet, but Tom and I did, is that when they move away, when they go to college, you need their roommate to be on the lookout for a low sugar. Before the monitors that, would give an alert automatically, you could have a child who was having a low sugar and they're away from home for the first time and you're not there. And it's, with all the other challenges that college has or presents, this is an additional one. And before I get to the next question, I just want to note that taking an SAT, and in my daughter's case, taking the LSAT, you need to make special arrangements that your diabetic can get snacks during the test. And that is possible. It's federal. You can make sure that they get accommodations, because you don't want them going into a high sugar or a low sugar when they're doing a test that has such an important impact. And this is true for many. You can get extra time on exams. Most colleges and high schools will work with you, but they're not going to volunteer this information, so you're going to have to bring it up to them. But it's something you have to think of, because you don't want your kid getting a lower score than they're capable of having because they couldn't get some sugar when they need it, because the anxiety and stress of taking a test is frequently going to send their sugar low, or it could send it too high, and both of those things are going to affect them. Eleanor Clark asked, do you think we will ever get control of diabetes, and why persons don't take it as seriously as they should? Before I turn this over to the panel, I'm going to say you can have excellent control of diabetes and still have complications from it. My children's A1Cs are going to be better than anyone else who's non-diabetic. My daughter's is in the 3s. But even with perfect control and taking everything into account, you can develop the others ancillary complications. And that was something that was a real shock for me to learn. But the rest of the panel, what do you say to that question about people taking diabetes seriously?
I think, especially having, this is my experience with having a kid that was so young when I diagnosis. Even though we do take it very seriously and we do everything in our power to try to control and manage, and we're doing the best we can, that doesn't mean that diabetes is going to play nice. So, it's even though you're trying to manage it, it manages you sometimes. And we don't make a good pancreas. We don't know what things her body's going through, especially with puberty and things like that affect those numbers. It's hard for us to keep up sometimes because we don't know exactly what is affecting her numbers. We kind of just say it's like a roller coaster. It's like highs and lows, and you just never know which turn you're going to make next. And so I think that's probably a little more difficult for people who have kids who are diagnosed younger. I think the changes and stuff they go through, I think affects probably more, even though we are working really hard. That we're hoping as she gets a little bit older that it does calm down a little bit with the extreme highs and lows. And I know she'll still have those, but they won't be quite as often, maybe.
I think that one thing we're doing now is, in terms of, we all know to take it seriously, we're doing programs like this, and everyone speaks and does, we talk about the awareness aspect of this. That's so that everyone else knows how serious diabetes is. That this is not just, they, avoid candy and take an insulin shot once a day. It's an all-encompassing, every moment of your day aspect. You can't get stuck in traffic without it becoming something you had to prepare for when you're an adult type 1 diabetic. You have to keep snacks in your car in case you have an unexpected delay and you need to raise your blood sugar suddenly. You keep your insulin kit with you, and you keep your so you can monitor if you don't have it. And I want to say this: the 24-hour monitor is not something that everybody can afford. Most insurances will not pay for it. The last time I priced it was $15,000. So that's out of the reach of many, many families. And so you're thinking of this and planning. You can't have a spontaneous, let's head off somewhere without thinking, okay, will my diabetes be under control for that? And that raises into the other issue I want to say is that for those of us with adult diabetics who have been children, driving is a whole other scary thing. When you have a first-time driver, as a parent, it can be nerve-wracking. Barbara remembers, when her son started driving, it was probably something that kept her awake at night. When Matthew starts driving, when Layla starts driving, it's a whole other worry. And the last thing, a nightmare is getting that cell phone call from your diabetic that you can tell they're having a low sugar and they're not thinking clearly and they're driving a car on the freeway. How do you deal with that? And I've made emergency calls to state police, telling them to look for the car. I mean, it can be very scary because one of the things, when a diabetic gets low, they don't always have the ability to think clearly and say to themselves, I'm low, I need to do X, Y, and Z to address it. When they're low enough, and if there's a diabetic who goes low quickly, they don't respond and they don't know they're low. Everyone else is being unreasonable. Would you agree with that, Tom?
I would, and I've had a number of those experiences where my son called me late at night, didn't know where he was. I had to look around, describe what signs he saw. By him doing that, I could figure out where he was, grab juice and run out. So it's scary. Exam periods in college. The stress kind of builds them up and they get high sugars and they adjust their insulin up. And my experience is whenever you get through one of those stress periods, be careful because, when the stress is relieved, they take a dive because they've increased their insulin to offset the stress. And now the stress is gone and they've got too much insulin the next day. So it was always the day after exams, the day after Christmas, the day after something like that he just took a sudden dive.
Thank you for sharing that. It is hard. Layla, you have another question from Radha Malik. You're an inspiration for all kids and adults, and you are. Would you like to share with everyone how you stay strong and healthy and keep going to achieve your dreams?
Sure. So you just gotta hang in there. Sometimes things can be tough, especially, I don't know, things can just get tough in diabetes. Sometimes you just don't feel like normal kids. Sometimes you just need a break and you just need to go into your room and take a few deep breaths or something. You can get through it. You got to believe in yourself. And if you believe in yourself, you can do it.
Excellent point. Thank you. Rita Luthra raises, how often should we check our blood sugar if we don't see any symptoms? And then if you do see symptoms, and I want to remind everyone that you can now check to see if you're what's the right phrase, Tom? I'm going to have you talk about this, the diabetic detection question.
The T1 detect? Yeah. The other thing I was going to say when you talked about the continuous glucose monitors, the magic words are hypoglycemic unawareness. So make sure you talk to your doctors and express that your child or yourself are not aware of when you're experiencing low blood sugars. And if they include that in their diagnosis that there's hypoglycemic unawareness, that's the magic words to get insurance to approve the continuous glucose monitor. So, and I forget, what was the first question again?
How often you test, if you're not diabetic, you're going to be on the lookout for the symptoms of excessive thirst, excessive urination, because your body's trying to get rid of the extra sugar, weight loss that's unexplained, and actually some people talk about their breath smelling sweet to other people. Yeah. That's going to be a sign that you can test for, but also a great tool now is the type 1 diabetes detect.
Yeah, so I would say type 1 detect, you would look to do that maybe every several years. That's not something you want to do every couple of months or things like that, since it takes a while to develop. Once those proteins are identified, If there's none there, you can wait a couple years to do it again if you think that there's a chance. You can always do blood sugar checks. There's enough people now that, although with the continuous glucose monitor, the people that have the portable machines with the strips are getting fewer and fewer. It used to be when we go anywhere, a lot of people would ask us to test their blood sugar with Brian's kit. He doesn't carry a kit around with him anymore because he's got the CGM, so you don't have that capability. But you can get your blood tested periodically for sugar. They do it as part of typical blood screenings these days too. So.
If your pediatrician or doctor is not testing your blood sugar when you have a routine checkup and a well check, then you ask them for it. That's part of, your awareness now. Make sure you ask them because you do not want to be very seriously ill. We're almost at the end of our time, so I want to give everyone an opportunity to say a few final words if they'd like. Tom.
Yeah, I would just like to take a moment to thank the Lions Club organization for all you do to support type 1 diabetes research, all the fundraising you do. It's been a long partnership for us in South Jersey. I know I've been going to some Lions Club meetings for years, going back 20 years or so. So we really appreciate everything you do and the awareness and the funding that you bring to help us do additional research to bring this to an end. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Amy and Layla, was there anything else you'd like to tell our audience before we finish?
I was gonna tell all the diabetics out there, stay strong.
Yeah, and we're so thankful for the opportunity. Just like Tom said, Lions Club has provided a platform for us that we've, been able to educate so many people, and that's so important to us because education is half the battle. And it's also, just makes you feel good when you feel like you're doing something good for the world. And so we're very, very grateful for the opportunity to speak anytime.
Barbara, my friend, would you like to say a few words?
I would just like to say that it's been 10 years that type 1 diabetes has been in the forefront of our family with Matthew's diagnosis, and the advances in those 10 years in technology are incredible. And that's why we continue to fundraise, why we continue to make people aware of it, and just keep talking about it, keep walking and raising money in order to see these advances continue. And maybe someday turn type 1 into type none.
Outstanding, thank you. And my final thing would be just to build on that. If you're a Lion in New Jersey, please support making JDRF one of our state projects when we have convention this year, next month. And also, we heard from Layla how important Diabetes Camp is. So we would like to make sure that Diabetes Camp, the Diabetes Camp in New Jersey, becomes a state project again. We have Lion Strides events. We're having virtual ones in the state next month. And we invite you to contact us to find out how you can support it. So visit, and 2 important sites to visit are going to be JDRF, with all of this wonderful information that Tom shared, you can find there. And also check out Lions Club International with all the outstanding information that they have on how your club can take a more active role and do more to help with diabetes action and awareness. And now I'm going to turn this over to the man behind the curtain, which is past council chair Mahesh Chitnis, to say a few.
Thank you so much, Lion Donna. This whole exercise began a few weeks back when my co-chair, Lion Anjupuri, got this idea of talking about diabetes, creating awareness, and some education. One of the first things that I did was, or rather, it came the other way around. Lion Donna offered that she would help us in doing the type 1 diabetes part. And Lion Donna and Lion Barbara came together, joined hands, and made it sure that this particular segment was more than successful. One thing that I'm going to blame all our 4 speakers today, they made us tear up. Tom and Donna, Barbara, and especially Amy and Leila, they made us cry. I met Leila about, like, I think 4 or 5 years back in Las Vegas Lions Convention. And that time, she was jumping all around on the stage, and Amy was making us cry. But today, both of them did that. So thank you, Tom, Donna, Barbara, Amy, Leila, for supporting this, creating this awareness, and educating Lions and the everybody around the world, Lions and future Lions, I would say, around the world. We have the attendees from over about 30 to 40 countries, and like I have not crunched the numbers, but we surely have more than 500 to 1,000 people watching live right now. With that, let me sort of give you a little bit of background, like a little bit of outlay of what is going to happen in the afternoon. We had the diabetes awareness session focused on fitness last week on the Real Diabetes Alert Day. We had Lion Lori Sheehan from Bird Island, Minnesota, talk about how to manage your diabetes with exercise and other things. And we had a couple of other speakers talking about diabetes with yoga and the importance of managing diabetes. We had this session focused on type 1. I am a type 2 diabetes, like I have type 2, and I can really feel what, even if I don't understand truly, but I can feel what Leila and other children go through with type 1 diabetes. When my blood sugar goes down, I know how difficult it is to explain it to others what I'm going through. So this was an important session for even if you are not type 1 diabetic, or if you have nobody who is type 1 diabetic, you need to know, because you must be like you might find somebody in a mall or anywhere else where they are going through this, and you can support them. It is very, very critical for all the village to come together and support the patients who are going through certain issues, but more than that, helping the research organizations to make sure that there is a cure that is found, or at least the life is made a little easier. This afternoon, we have this program for the similar program for type 2 diabetes. It has been hosted by Lion Anju in support with the RUTGERS program, which promotes healthy lifestyle and holds the peer groups for supporting the people who have diabetes. So thank you again, all the speakers, especially Donna and Barbara, for arranging all this. And please come back in another hour's time for type 2. So thank you so much. And even if I had taken out Amy and Leila out, I'm going to put them on because I love what they were doing. I could see that on the back end. What were you doing? So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Barbara. And I'll have Barbara back. Like it is. I would have Donna back to close this out.
Again, thank you, everyone. Please be sure to watch the next part of the symposium starting at 1 o'clock. And we thank Lion Mahesh, Lion Anju for their help in putting this on and giving us all the opportunity to share our stories and to give better awareness of type 1 diabetes and what you can do to help. So all have a wonderful rest of the weekend, and thank you again for watching.